so high like plane. Yeah, bigger don't get so much brain.
Hello everybody, how are you all doing? My name's FVS, the owner of ASTRAL SMC. In today's video I'm going to be taking you through one of my favourite entry models, and an entry model that I've seen becoming more and more popular over the last couple of weeks and months. And I've seen a lot of people on YouTube kind of overcomplicating this model, so I wanted to come out and give you a really simplified version of how this model works, how you guys can use it in your charts, and how you guys can pass funded accounts, get payouts, all that good stuff with using this model. Just before we get into the video, I will say this is the model that I use most on futures. It does work for both Forex and futures. My experience is just personally on the future side using this model. There are 4 simple steps when using this model. First off, we want there to be a high time frame stop hunt, as we have lots of liquidity resting above and below these levels. After that, we need to see there be displacement, and from this displacement we want there to be a breaker block and a fair value gap aligning or overlapping. So we want the fair value gap to either be inside the breaker block, or we want the fair value gap and the breaker block to kind of overlap with each other. So on the left side of your screen here you can see we have a bearish example, a bearish trade. So we have our step 1, we have our stop hunt and our liquidity sweep. After that we have our displacement, which is this market structure shift here. We've got our displacement, and then left behind due to this displacement is this breaker block. I like to refer to breaker blocks as failed order blocks. I'm not going to cover breaker blocks and fair value gaps in this video, but there's lots of other videos out there on the fact, or you can come into my Discord. There's free PDFs on all of the simple concepts. So we have our breaker block here, our failed order block, and we also have our fair value gap. Our fair value gap's aligned with this breaker block. There's an overlap here, and we use that overlap to enter on the retracement. When entering using this model, you can either put your stop at the high, you can put your stop at the top of the fair value gap, but you should always aim for either a fixed 2 risk reward, or you target the next draw on liquidity. On the right hand side of your screen, this is the bullish example, our bullish trade. We have our step 1, we have our high time frame stop hunt here. We have our liquidity sweep. From there we then have our displacement to the upside, which then causes this order block to fail. So we now have our breaker block, and that displacement caused there to be a fair value gap. It left behind this imbalance. So we set our limits, or we market execute when we get that retracement into this alignment or the overlap of the breaker block and the fair value gap. Stop loss at the low or at the bottom of the fair value gap, whichever you choose, with either a fixed 2 risk reward, or go and target the next draw on liquidity. This model can be used on any time frame. I like to use the 1 hour to look for my high time frame stop hunt, and then I use the 5 minute to wait for my displacement and my breaker block and my fair value gap. If you're going to pair the high time frame, the low time frame, use the 1 minute as the low time frame, the 15 minutes your high time frame. If you're using the 5 minute, the 1 hour is your high time frame, and if you're using the 15 minute, use the 4 hours your high time frame. These are the 3 time frame pairings that I suggest to use the most. Now that we understand the model, let's have a look at a few trade examples. In this example, if we head over to the 1 hour chart, we can see that there has been a stop hunt. We've swept this liquidity to the upside, so we've now head down to the 5 minute time frame. We then have this displacement here with this market structure shift. There's also more minuscule market structure shifts here. I like to use the most recent. Because of that, this order block here fails. This is an order block because we then took liquidity off of it. So we're left with this breaker block behind, and in the kind of process of displacement we had this fair value gap which was left behind. The fair value gap's the red box, the breaker block's the orange blocks, and then we put our limit on the overlap of the two where the fair value gap meets the breaker block. We can either put our stop losses at the top of the fair value gap or the breaker block, or we can put it at the high. we can then target a 2 risk reward, which would have been hit, or we can look at a higher time frame draw on liquidity, like this low for example, which does get hit as well. If you're wanting a more mechanical way, I suggest using the 2RR, 2 risk reward kind of stop loss and TP placement. If you're looking for potentially passing your accounts quicker but maybe more risk, have a look at the next draw on liquidity. You can obviously take partials at a 2RR and then hold to the next draw on liquidity. It's up to you. Now let's have a look at a naked chart. There's no annotations. I'm going to show you what I'd be looking for on a chart. So on this chart, our most significant low is this low here, which gets taken out by ES. So we now have our stop hunts. We've got our step 1 here. After that stop hunt, we're then waiting for our displacement, which comes in the form of this market structure shift here. From this market structure shift, we're then left with this breaker block. And inside that breaker block, it's only a small one, but we are then left with this bullish fair value gap, which I'm going to colour in green. So we've got our FVG and we've got our breaker block, and these are aligned. So we wait for the retracement into the overlap of the breaker block and the fair value gap. Sorry, wrong one. And we put our buy at this level. On a trade like this, I will most likely not put my stop loss all the way at the low, because we had to come quite a far away for that displacement to happen. We've already had a significant amount of displacement, so I'm happy that we're not going to go and take out the low again. I also probably wouldn't put my stop at the bottom of this fair value gap. It's just way too tight for me personally. My stop would kind of be around this low here, which would be like a 1 minute low. From here, we can do one of two things. We can either target our 2RR, which you can see would have been hit by this area of the chart over here, or we can target our next draw on liquidity, which is this high here. This will be our high time frame draw on liquidity, which is high here. So all 4 steps there happened in this trade, and we would have won regardless of taking our draw on liquidity or our fixed 2RR. So looking at the chart next, this is our next area that we want to see get swept. And what happens? This stop hunt happens here. We take out that high time frame liquidity, that 1 hour high. We then wait for there to be displacement, which we have happen here. We get that breaker block, which I'm going to colour in orange, keep it consistent. We have our breaker block, and within that breaker block we have this bearish fair value gap. And now what are we going to do? So we've got our stop run, we've got our displacement. All of these are market structure shifts as well. There just isn't any breaker block or a fair value gap to enter off of. So that's not the model itself. This is the first point in which we have that both that breaker and that fair value gap to enter from. So now we've got our breaker block and our fair value gap. We're waiting for that tap back in. We enter on the overlap. We can have our stop at the high, this high, this high, this high, whichever you prefer. Just put it at this high. Then we can target our either fixed 2 risk reward, as so, in which we would have won instantly, or we can look at the next draw on liquidity, which would be probably this low down here. which would have been hit also. In addition, if you did miss this entry, or it wasn't one that you were looking out for, we did also have this displacement here of this low, which left behind this breaker block, and within this breaker block, sorry, let me change color, we have the overlap of this fair value gap there, with this bearish fair value gap. And if we did want to enter a second position, or just we missed the entry on the last one, we can have our stop at this high. We can target our probably a 2RR here, because that basically aligns with the next draw on liquidity, or we can look even lower and target some of, I don't know, maybe even this low down here. Thank you all for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully this simplified the unicorn model for you all. Just before the video ends, I want to mention that I am doing some 2024 private mentorship, both one-to-ones and in group sessions. Sign-ups are still available. The sign-ups will be 2 weeks, let kind of price action die down for the first couple weeks of the year, and then we'll be getting right into it. I hope you all have a great day, and Happy New Year.
I'm the captain, take you all over the atlas. Anyway, I do magic, I turn the good girl ratchet. Would you Captain Morgan, I'm just like Captain Sparrow. I'm Tony Montana, baby, I'm Tony Soprano. South American bad one, two-face, way two-face.